Good morning from London. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. Coming up on today's programme here at Midori House, not D90 in Zurich. My guest today, Nina dos Santos, also Latika Bourke is here. They're going to share their views on the biggest stories. Nina, we were just catching up before we went on air. What are the topics for you today?
There's only one word, and I'm going to mention it a few times. Elections. We're 7 days off the elections. The first round in France, in those parliamentary elections, about 11 days off the big vote here in the UK. And it's not looking good for the incumbents. Surprise, surprise, obviously Rishi Sunak being pummeled in the polls, Macron in third position. But the big thing in the UK is this betting scandal, where it just seems day after day we're learning that more figures inside the ruling Conservative Party may well have put bets on the date of the election just before it was announced. The question is, did they have insider information?
Much to unpack. Also, Monocle senior news editor Chris Cermak is here. He's going to be he's going to be talking about, of course, everything from Washington, of course, pre-NATO summit. We're also going to be heading to Finland as well to get the latest news from there.
Yes, it's midsummer again, the time of the year when people in the Nordic countries head over to their summer cabins, wear flowers on their heads, and just dance and eat and party for 3 days and nights. I'm Monocle's Helsinki correspondent Petri Burtsoff, and I'll be joining you live from the Finnish archipelago to tell you all about how we like to celebrate the summer solstice.
Plus, Swiss ambassador to the UK, Markus Leitner, joins us right here at Midori House to talk a little bit about, of course, the summer market we had this weekend, of course, Swiss diplomacy in general as well. It's the 23rd of June, 2024, live from London. This is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday with Tyler Brûlé.
And good morning from a fully seated Midori House. Listeners, we were just saying this morning, it's so odd. Normally this program, when it comes from Zurich, we're standing at a table, but now I'm seated. Emma Nelson, this is a gig you're used to.
I'm used to being sort of ensconced in the windowless room in the darkness. And I think we've spoken in the past before between the change in dynamic, that when you are on your own in a small dark room, it's a little bit different from being up on what is effectively a stage.
It is a stage, yeah.
With guests,
yes,
and light,
dogs,
natural light, coffee, machines,
well.
Children.
Yes,
the general hubbub and pandemonium. But what we've managed to do is try to slightly recreate the atmosphere here by cramming as many people as we can into the studio.
Absolutely, which is great. I finally get to meet Latika Bourke in person. I mean, I've heard your voice down the line, all corners of the world. Fantastic having you across this table, seated this morning.
How's it that we've never been in a studio together?
I don't know, or a cocktail party properly either. Anyway, nevertheless, what's caught your eye this morning? I mean, we're going to get into many other things, but if we said sort of just teasing our listeners across the next hour, what have you seen, Latika?
I'm loving this very long read in the Sunday Times today about whether you should put your rosé on ice. And whether you should...
On cubes, you mean? Yes.
Very controversial.
Yes.
Whether, what temperature is good for drinking rosé, the hue of rosé. And actually, a question I think for everyone here, who even likes rosé? Do we like rosé?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Nina?
No ice.
No ice, but you like it.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, very good.
Okay, rosé is the last wine I would opt for.
Really?
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we will
delve into this.
We've got time on that a little bit later. Nina, great having you here as well. Of course, elections, but aside from elections, what else? Anything else caught your eye? Peeking at Le Figaro, Les Echos, I don't know, Welt am Sonntag this morning. Anything else out there in the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot going on. One of the interesting sort of sidebar stories, I think, that's quite interesting is one of the newspapers is saying, well, look, if you look at Justin Timberlake, you remember he was recently arrested for allegedly driving under the influence. His mugshot has gone viral. And there's been a sort of piece in many of the newspapers in the UK at the moment saying, well, look, isn't it interesting because we have these moments where celebrities sort of disappear from view, and then something like that happens, and then they become celebrities once more, and that's quite an interesting angle, I think, in terms of sort of Justin Timberlake's revival. That's one of the stories that caught my eye in the newspaper. And then just going back to, sorry to bleat on about the subject of elections, but it does dovetail quite nicely with the Provençal rosé. The Sunday Times has an interesting front page piece about the small little town of Minerbe in the Luberon, which I know quite well. It's really beautiful. beautiful. And the point that they're making there is that even though they have no reason to sympathise with Marine Le Pen's national rally, because none of the social issues that she's championing on her platform actually are relevant to this paradisical Provençal idyll, they're still seeing a spike in rise for the far right. So it just goes to speak to that that sort of seductive ideology that the far right in France is espousing, and how it's gaining traction even in rather profligate places where really in theory it shouldn't.
Our Chris Cermak is also here this morning. Chris, we're not in London, and we're not in Zurich this morning, but I thought I've got a story from the NZZ for you. This is what the paper is leading with on a Sunday morning. This is from a Polish marriage broker who says Germans, Swiss and Austrians, Chris, just like you, are hardly available for marriage anymore. So for 4 decades, Agata Zabilska has been bringing together Polish men and women who want to get married. She says she knows why Polish women are hardly looking for Western Europeans anymore, what women over 50 want, and why Polish men are suddenly receiving offers from abroad. Chris, why are the Austrians out of the game?
Well, I can say that last night I was at an Austrian summer ball right here in London at the embassy.
Okay.
I did go to that. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's one place that is quite a good option where it was sort of all the young things of Austria who are hanging out and doing waltzes and all that kind of stuff. It was a fabulous event. And I think that's our opportunity, I would say.
How relaxed do you get at an Austrian event like that?
You know what? I think it is very interesting, the comparisons, because I think when you do it in London, it is going to be different than in Vienna. In Vienna, a ball is very formal also because everybody knows how to waltz, and therefore it is expected that you are going to work your way around the room. I do know somewhat how to waltz. I've taken various lessons at different points, and there was a refresher course last weekend ahead of the ball on Saturday night as well. But at the same time, they taught you sort of the English version of the waltz, and everyone was having a bit more fun with it and kind of bumping into each other as it went. So that made it a bit more of a relaxed atmosphere, I would say, Emma, than normal.
And what was the dress code like? Does everyone actually gown
it's
up?
proper black tie, yes, gown up. Absolutely.
And how many, what are we talking, cast of hundreds? How many?
Oh yeah, easily hundreds. I mean, it was in the Austrian embassy, which is 2 floors, so they have an outside bit as well and balconies, so it's easily 200-300 people.
How does one get
like
an invite to this?
Well,
I am part of the Austrian Club of London, I can say.
I was in Vienna earlier in the week, and now one of the big stories amongst diplomats in Vienna is that the lease is up soon. So this is one of the longest reigning sort of, continually operated embassies in London, and their lease is up around sort of 2032 or something. So they're already thinking, are they going to be able to extend it? Because I think it's rather fine digs, isn't it? As
it
residents,
is very beautiful. Yeah. It's a very beautiful two stories, as I say. And so yes, I mean, there's a lot of embassy space in London, I suppose, but I don't think they would want to leave there now.
I think we just have to go back to Warsaw to Mrs. Zabilska for a second. I just have to say,
I thought I dodged that.
I know, but I just have to go through. So she's saying she's got the oldest marriage agency in the Polish capital. It's located around from the Palace of Culture. It's called Astoya, of course, founded by Agata Zabilska. But this is interesting. She said there's Tinder fatigue, and the world has woken up because, as a result, it says marriage brokers were supposed to think of the past, but since Christmas, they're beating down her doors.
So what does she do for us then?
Well, what she does is she's been hooking people up across the border, across borders. Obviously, that's what she's done. She's got an interesting fact here that 70% of Polish Tinder users are actually married.
Oh, that's
no way.
Yes, that's what Mrs. Zabilska is saying. And
does she do divorces as well?
I wonder. Anyway, said her biggest problem, however, is the lack of women. Says there are hardly any in her database, especially in the age group between 20 and 40. Things get a little better after 50.
Excellent.
Among men, those between 30 and 40 are particularly well represented. Zabilska sees this as a social trend, namely that more and more Polish women no longer want to start a family.
Well, no wonder if they're all on Tinder being married. If your husband's spending half of his time
of them,
talking to Mrs. Zabilska, trying to hook up with someone up the road in Wrocław, that's not going to work.
Okay, Nina. We're talking elections. We've almost got a competition. I mean, of course, cross channel as well. All eyes on this city, also all eyes on Paris as well. Should we start on the other side of the channel, though? How are things looking for Monsieur Macron? What is the jockeying in the league table look like at the moment? Because we're weeks away now from this.
Yeah, it's looking worse and worse, isn't it? It's looking as though this spectacular gamble, his side are very concerned, may not have paid off, because essentially I was reading in one of the papers earlier that it seems as though obviously now it's becoming clearer and clearer that maybe when he called this snap election, what he was trying to do was, give the far right a chance at trying to run the country and make a complete mess of it. And as a result, then the wisdom, he perhaps thought, was that centrist movements would then prevail in a couple of years. But actually, the big problem for him is that the leftist parties have actually coalesced finally, even though they've got this uneasy, grouping that they've managed to ally together to form. That's now in second position, and Macron's party is in third position. And so what you're seeing is him becoming increasingly unpopular among his own MPs because they feel that they've been wrong-footed. Many of the members of the cabinet, I've been counting over the days, I still have not seen one cabinet member say that they were consulted before and that they support this decision to have these snap elections. So it's looking bad, and it's also looking quite toxic. And we've got the first of those debates for the candidates that are happening at the start of next week, just 7 days away from the polls.
So if you look at Le Figaro this morning, it seems like every third story, of course, is also calling for Mr. Macron to, of course, step down immediately as well. What happens in that instance? Do we go? I mean, obviously, because there's always a presidential election. Do we go for that again, or do we have are we moving into uncharted territory slightly?
Well, so the Rassemblement National, the National Rally, have actually tried to sort of challenge him on this, and repeatedly, as far as I'm aware, over the last week, he's made the point that, look, constitutionally, the French constitution says he doesn't have to step down.
Correct.
We know that he's quite keen on sticking to the constitution, but also using the executive levers of power of the constitution, and that's what he's been much criticised for over the last couple of years since he lost his majority in the French Parliament, thanks to the rise of the far right back in 2022. He's been ruling by executive decree, and so it's very unlikely that he would actually step down. The slight problem that he has is that actually Jean Bardella, who's the candidate for Marine Le Pen's National Rally to become Prime Minister, he said if he can't form a majority government, he doesn't actually want the job. So that sort of calls Emmanuel Macron's bluff here a bit, and it's quite unclear where things would go. Also, at the same time, I should point out that Olaf Scholz is weaker, and there have been calls for him to step down. And of course, he as well says, look, the Constitution doesn't allow that, and there's no need for me to do so.
It's good that we're opening on this coming Thursday, that our Paris bureau opens as well, which is going to be very exciting. So, of course, just in time. We didn't even time it in a way that we thought, okay, there'll be a proper setup there. I say proper setup. It's not going to sound like this because it's sort of galleried. It's a wonderful, I think, probably former photo studio. I don't know what it was. Someone said we could actually sort of blow up to there if we wanted to. Emma, we could have you rolling around in a cove or something like that, right?
No problem with that.
Photographer on ladder. I don't know. No, we went into this. We were in this space about a year ago, and it's just off of Rue de Fil de Calvaire in the Marais, and it's just this wonderful sort of long box, skylit. I'm sure it's going to be an absolute oven. It looked great. It looked great when we saw it in March on sort of a day when it was only 10 degrees outside. Who knows what it's going to be like under? Well, hopefully 32 degrees if it comes back to Paris at some point. Maybe we don't need 32, but anyway,
it's a useful. It's a really, really good time to set up shop in Paris, given the fact that obviously we have political turmoil that we've been talking about again. But when you have the Olympics, it's a moment when actually everybody looks to France to see what they can do, and not just within Paris, but if you're based in Paris, you can whiz around the hexagon in such a so quickly. So it's a super time to start up.
That white shirt of yours is not going to be so crisp when that also becomes our production office, because of course we're going to be out there for 2 weeks for the Olympics as well over the coming weeks. But anyway, of course we'll have lots more from of course France, Paris in general, of course with the run up to the not just the games but also the sort of election which has sort of found its way first. Okay, Latika, can jump over to you. Elections in this country dominating the front pages. Great that we've also got rosé stories as well, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. But just assessing what is happening over here. And it was interesting, we had this market this weekend, canvassing views, everyone sort of course talking about what's going to happen. Not just, of course, in terms of the chess figures, but also what happens to the city, the country in general, who's coming, who's going. What's your assessment?
So it's been a really interesting week in the UK election because it's been actually quite dull, hasn't it? No one's really said or done anything. But I think a couple of significant things happened this week. Firstly, Nigel Farage went on the BBC and said that Putin was provoked into invading Ukraine. Huge mistake, in my view. And I've been waiting to see just how much or if the Tories will pounce on this and capitalise on it. And they've done so in a very muted kind of way, which suggests they're still so terrified about taking Farage full throttle on. Now, Farage's campaign, I think, is probably the slickest out there. He is releasing glossy videos. The man and the dog on a park bench in the Kent countryside, they look seriously good. He has got a lot of money behind him this election. And of course, the fear for the Tories is, and I was speaking to somebody very senior in the campaign just a couple of days ago, is not Labor. In fact, this person said to me, I'm not worried about Labor, I'm worried about reform. And that night, Farage makes his big blooper. Now, what's really interesting is the right-wing press have gone even harder on Farage than the actual Tories themselves. So the Mail on Sunday today has come out very strongly with a furious front page quoting Zelensky, saying that Farage has the evil of Putin inside him. Now, that's a really strong front page. And so you can see this kind of late galvanising for the Tories that might not otherwise have been there. So I think this is a potential lifeline for the Tories to maybe cling on to some seats that they would otherwise have lost to Reform. The other thing that I think's been really interesting this weekend is we've seen Keir Starmer do a blizzard of interviews in a get-to-know-you style, and it's extraordinary that 4 years into his leadership, we still don't really know this guy. I mean, it's only in the FT on the weekend that we learned he'd played the flute, didn't think it was good enough, hung it up and said, look, this is kind of my motto. If I can't be the best, I won't proceed. He's also done The Guardian. He's in The Times today. So 2 weeks are out from an election. We're finally getting to know something about this guy. We know so little about Labor's agenda, and taxes, of course, are still, I think, the biggest vulnerability. But I'm very doubtful, as Nina alluded to earlier at the start of the program, this betting scandal, I think it just shows the absolute rot that the Tories find themselves in. You know, it is a government that is now just attracting what looks like crooks.
Yeah, and I want to come back to the betting scandal in a moment, but just let's jump back to France very quickly, because we're seeing the same thing also around Jordan Bardella as well. Stories also coming out, Nina, that we sort of finding out who this 28-year-old is, what makes him tick or not as well.
But TikTok.
You know, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, and this is really sort of remarkable to see because, you know, on some sides people say, oh, he's just, you know, he's an empty vessel. Of course, many spin doctors and great speech writers, and he's just incredible at delivery, incredibly charismatic. I mean, has you know, so many fanboys. He's become, of course, you know, really the poster child for young men because he's buff, he's good looking, he's, you know, he knows how to wear a necktie, all of these things. And it's been amazing to see that all of these things bubbling up in the French press this week as well.
Can I make an observation? I have not met Jordan Bardella, but I have interviewed Nigel Farage many, many times when he was an MEP and used that as his sort of bully pulpit to, you know, campaign for Brexit and since. And I was watching Jordan Bardella talk about Ukraine the other day with a gaggle of reporters from, and I think it was somebody from BFM TV who was asking him about Ukraine, and he was more or less saying, look, you know, Macron's got to stop this suggestion of special forces going over NATO's borders potentially into Ukraine because Ukraine's not asking for it. And he was making sort of slight, not as aggressive comments as Nigel Farage for obvious reasons, but he was making comments about retrenching from support for Ukraine. And his body language was exactly like Nigel Farage. I immediately thought, my gosh, I suddenly realised who he's been modelling himself on. Even down to the sort of the way he holds his jaw. And I thought that was an interesting sort of observation. I wonder whether or not he's actually, you know, maybe Marine Le Pen, you know, she obviously has had a huge impact in creating his image because she needed somebody who was essentially young, a blank canvas, who didn't have the toxicity of the Le Pen name, to rebrand the party and make it more mainstream. And this is her little darling and her protégé. But he also is so like Nigel Farage. It's really interesting. And what he's been able to do is galvanise young voters in a way that other people in the far right in France haven't. Tons of them have come out in support of voting in things like the European parliamentary elections that, you know, frankly, not all that many EU citizens get motivated about, but he managed to get them motivated.
This causes a big problem for the media insofar as what they have to focus on in the run-up to an election. So, for example, What we're talking about today is the far right. Every single newspaper, every single television programme is focused on the far right. And the traditional structures of covering elections has been shattered by this. So, for example, if you've got the far right running high in France and you've got the far right running high in the United Kingdom, when you're putting leaders head to head in the public domain, who do you put in front of the camera? Do you put Jordan Bardella versus Macron? Do you put Jordan Bardella versus Mélenchon? Do you put Sunak, Starmer and Farage in the room together? It's causing a massive headache because if you are desperately worried that the far right is going to start to hijack the narrative or not, how much airtime do you need to give to this? And where are your priorities if you're a journalist or a news editor?
I just want to maybe just bring in anyone around the table, but on this, but you raised the point about, of course, the coaching that's going on, all of the grooming, the preening, of course, to position these people. I wonder if anyone has any insight. Of course, we've got a lot of course, debates coming up, etc. How much staging is going on that everyone has to sort of be at the same eye level, potentially, that everyone is sort of maybe at the same level at around a microphone? Any sort of insight on this, potentially?
There is quite a lot of work going on behind the scenes, I would imagine, to make sure that if you are a very, very tall candidate, you don't dominate the set in the same way that if you were smaller. Now, the interesting thing is if you look around Europe, you don't look at policy, you look at height. You'll see Macron, you'll see Sunak, and you'll see Olaf Scholz, 3 very, very small men. Mm-hmm. And it is one of those things that you cannot be seen to make the Prime Minister of England, for example, look a little bit too small. And so it is a big problem for anybody trying to create a set to make sure that everybody is the same height. So I suspect that boxes might be being built now, or other leaders might be being asked to step back a little bit just to make sure that eye height, that is the most important thing.
No seated debates.
No seated debates. You need energy.
But actually in France, so sometimes if you're watching on France 2, sometimes you do see this aircraft carrier style table as well, and you do see them seated sort of at either end.
France is interesting from the media landscape point of view, I think, because it's a little bit further back from the kind of situation we have in the UK. We have these sort of taped podcasts. They're now getting into that sort of taped podcast, radio, TV thing around a big table. So yes, you're right. And can I just say, the lighting on French TV is always amazing.
Amazing. There's so many.
Everybody looks so attractive.
There's so many bronze filters and and reflectors.
And the makeup.
Maybe that's why they don't stand. I don't know.
I mean, listen. Of course, Nina, you've spent plenty of time in and around French TV. Emma, you've of course been anchoring on France. Every time Emma would come back after a gig over in Paris, just going, oh my goodness, like just the curling tongs and everything just before you went on air. There's still just for news, if there's a proper makeup room.
They have a special room. Yes. And you have the French seat, the Arabic seat, and the English seat, and you go in, and there is a different makeup artist for each language, each service, and then the hair comes out. And the best thing is that they have that wonderful sharing of secrets of the French pharmacy.
Of course.
So it becomes a brilliantly collaborative thing. And I have things in my cabinet that I would never part with now because of the woman saying, it's about €10, but it will change your face forever. And you just head straight down to the pharmacy. And believe me, I'm very, very happy. It is magical. I don't know what they do.
Well, I do know one thing. Sat on the anchor table for quite a while. Is that the underlights built into the table, LEDs that light you from underneath, do better than any concealer.
They are brilliant.
That's all I'll say.
Okay, Latika, I'm handing over to you in 2.5 minutes. For the rest of the world who's not been following this betting scandal,
okay,
what is going on here?
Okay, right, betting scandal. Well, it emerged that one of the parliamentary kind of senior bigwigs close to Rishi Sunak, an MP, had bet £100 on the date of the election. Now, he bet before Rishi Sunak went out and made his announcement, but obviously the insinuation here is that he knew. He knew that Rishi Sunak was going to call that date because he was privy to insider information, essentially. Then it turned out a police protection officer was also hauled in and charged or questioned over the same thing. And now we're up to about 4 people, including 2 other Tory officials. One is like their campaign data manager. So this is a huge, huge scandal. And interestingly, I'm very struck by Michael Gove's comments on this today. He says this is like Partygate, in that people look at this and think there's one rule for them and one rule for everyone else. And I personally am a bit despairing that Michael Gove is one of those 80 Tories abandoning the sinking ship, because I think comments like that shows he's actually still very much in touch with where the community's at and could play a key role in helping rebuild and revive the Tory party. But alas, he's out the door.
Nina, your assessment on this as well, a story that is also going to continue to run, of course. It's one of many topics, and certainly, Latika, as you're saying as well, you have one rule for the rest of course, this country, and then, of course, another, certainly for another portion as well, they can abide by their own rules.
Well, first of all, in America, I understand that it's illegal, isn't it, for officials to actually bet, if they're, party officials, to bet on political stuff. There's obviously a big discussion taking place right now in the UK about whether or not the rules should be changed. I think it's the first time we've really seen a scandal like this, where we've seen so many people supposedly close to the top who've been hauled in. And by the way, the Gambling Commission is looking at all bets placed on this. And it's a very sort of narrow amount, because normally people don't go around betting in a flurry of betting just a couple of days before an election is announced. I was talking to a Tory MP a week before the election was announced, and they assured me that they had been assured that the election would be later on in the year. So people who are MPs of Rishi Sunak's own party appeared, who weren't close to the top but were, important and elected, were preparing for an election later on in the year. So it's obviously a rather small number of people. According to the press, around about 30-odd people might have been aware in the week before. So the question is, how many of them would have placed bets? This data analyst that Latika was just talking about before, who works on the Tory campaign, who's now taking a leave of absence, apparently made multiple bets. And it's relatable, isn't it? That's what the problem. It's like Partygate. It's relatable.
And
I just cannot believe that someone would throw away their career and potentially risk a criminal prosecution for £100. I mean,
especially
but they shouldn't be in government, Emma, as you were saying as well. Wouldn't you maybe get your housekeeper to place the bet, or somebody
exactly,
else? I mean, come on. I mean, so even if you're
but
going
apparently
to,
they're looking at that type of thing as well.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It is almost 9:31 here. And Emma Nelson's right beside me. I don't have to throw back to London. I have to throw just a meter. She's here with the bottom of the hour news headlines.
Thank you very much indeed, Tyler. The nuclear-powered US aircraft carrier, the Theodore Roosevelt, has arrived in the South Korean port city of Busan. It's taking part in joint military exercises later this month with the host nation and Japan. Israel's military has admitted it strapped a wounded Palestinian man to the front of their vehicle during a raid in the West Bank city of Jenin. 3 people are missing after floodwaters swept through the Alpine valley of Graubünden. A massive thunderstorm on Friday night caused rivers to break their banks, flooding streets and causing several dozen residents to be evacuated from their homes. And Switzerland's Federal Administrative Court has become involved in a row over the size of the holes in Emmental cheese. In the past, hay dust got into the milk during manual milking, introducing valuable bacteria that produced gas. But cleaner production methods have left fewer bugs, thus smaller holes. Producers say they want to now deliberately add hay dust to make the holes bigger again, something Switzerland's Agriculture Office says is forbidden, arguing that Emmental is perfectly fine as it is. Back to you, Tyler.
You could be the official fromage correspondent because, Kay's a correspondent because Emma Nelson was down this far side of Midori House. We had a wonderful cheese vendor here yesterday, and you were introduced to the Belperknolle yesterday, which
I was. Tell us what a Belperknolle is, Tyler.
So a Belperknolle is it's about the size of a golf ball. It's a very sort of a very hard, very dry cheese that it's wrapped or it's almost sort of rolled in pepper, and it is just delightful. And it's almost like a truffle. It almost looks a little bit like a truffle, and you shave it, so it's super, super dry. And he was, he said, well, it's great on a pasta. It's, I said it would just be great on anything. And of course, it was sort of great on top of your wrist as well, Emma, as you sort of snarfed it back.
It was in the same way that you would have. You do snarf it. That's such a good description. I was sort of taken over to the stall and just asked to hold my hand out because someone was going to grate cheese on it, and I thought, okay, I'm game for anything here. But that stall really did have that lovely lovely, lovely sort of hay and herb wrapped cheese, which made me think of the Emmental, because if you have this crazy industrial scale production of cheese and they're having an argument about whether you should introduce hay back into its production, and then you have the Belperknolle and the herb wrapped cheese from Switzerland, it sort of makes you think, oh, hang on, where are we going with cheese nowadays? That's a bigger issue.
No, but it was interesting because this gentleman was then encouraging all of us who are gathered to, of course, try this Alpine cheese, but it's you have to eat the rind as well. And it looks like really it's been sort of rolled down a hill and been through everything that you might have in a meadow.
Tastes a bit like that as well.
but it was awfully tasty. It's just gone 9:33 here in London, 10:33 back in Zurich. It's 11:33 in Helsinki, and certainly in Finland. We're heading out to the archipelago because our correspondent Petri Burtsoff is there for us this morning. Petri, good morning.
Good morning, Tyler. I hope you can hear me for all the seagulls flying and all the swans flying. And there's a little bit of a wind here, so I've kind of retreated onto the terrace of a log cabin here, but I hope the line is fine.
Well, listen, Petri, for those who caught the very top of the program, you're going to tell us a little bit about, of course, these midsummer days. And, of course, the first question is, you've had this amazing weather up on your side of the Baltic for weeks and weeks, changed recently, but it just seems to me that, whenever I went up to Sweden for midsummer, it was always shocking. It was just always the most dreadful weather. It could have been sunny, right up until the day before. But then it was always a bit sort of soggy and damp, and everyone trying to make the best of it around the barbecue. How was it in Finland? And of course for your neighbours in the Baltic region as well this weekend?
Well, funny you should say that, Tyler, because it was exactly like that. It was up until 2 days ago, it was still kind of overcast and, plus 17 or so. We came here to the island, and it's been, for the 3 days that we've been here, it's been sort of plus 23, 24, perfect sunny weather for swimming and the sauna and the dancing that takes on during this Midsummer Fest. And I believe it's been similar weather in Sweden as well. And of course, Finland and Sweden are sort of speaking of the 5 Nordic countries, Finland and Sweden are the countries where we celebrate the midsummer the most. I mean, the Norwegians and the Danes, they celebrate it somewhat, but it's not like the highlight of the summer. Then Icelanders, they're just weird. They have another celebration, but they believe in all this like magic stuff there. So mainly Finland and Sweden, and it's been wonderful weather. And this is the 3rd day of partying in a row. I'm surprised I'm still standing. Well, actually, I'm sitting, but I was standing before. So all good.
Okay, listen, I mean, if this was the day when we had a switchboard, the lines would be lighting up with all of these, outraged Icelanders saying that basically you're saying they're into hocus pocus. That may or may not be true. Anyway, let's move on. Tell us what happens in the days after, and maybe what defines Finnish midsummer versus, of course, what the Swedes might do. And let's not forget the fact that, of course, there's no shortage of Swedes or people, or let's say Finns of Swedish descent, also within your borders.
Yeah, that's correct. So actually, my family is one of those. So we celebrate sort of according to the Swedish way. But basically, the way it works is Friday is the midsummer evening, midsommarafton, and that's already a day off for everybody. So that's including top CEOs, government ministers. Actually, one of them has a summer house just nearby. So
Which one? Everyone wants to know. Which one?
I can't reveal. Let's say that it's not one of the top ministerial posts.
Okay, all right.
Anyway, so Thursday is still a work day, but you won't find anybody in the office after midday because there's a lot of traffic and you want to get into or pack your car and start driving either to your lakeside cabin or then your seaside cabin early on. And then Friday is when it all starts. And there's an official celebration in Sweden and in the Swedish-speaking parts of Finland. It's the raising of the midsummer pole, the midsommarstång, which is this wonderful sort of a couple of meter high pole, which is decorated in birch leaves and flowers. And then we raise the pole and then we dance around it and sing all kinds of songs.
Just give us an opening line, like what's like the sort of the chart topper of all of the sort of midsummer songs.
Oh my God! I think this is really like family specific. So we actually
go for it.
Okay. We sing this song about a fox it's actually kind of ironic. It's a fox crossing an icy lake. It's called Reven raskar över isen, Reven raskar över isen. And then we basically act different kinds of occupations. So my job was to act what a journalist does. So I basically just did a typewriter and then drinking.
Absolutely, because so many journalists use typewriters these days.
Oh,
Perfect.
Exactly. So, it is a tradition.
But I want to go back to this. So this is this fox on the lake, on a frozen lake, right? But is this a song only sung during Midsummer, or this might also come up on New Year's Eve as well?
It's actually it's a children's song. I have no idea why they sing it over on Midsummer. But listen, a lot of these traditions are weird, because there's also then the whole thing of putting flowers under your pillow to increase. I believe it's to increase fertility. Then there's like you have to be naked and look into a well if you're single, and then you see your future partner. And then you go into a meadow and you strip naked and wear flower crown on your head and roll around in the meadow. And that promises to give you a full year of good fortunes. So, there's a lot of weird stuff happening.
There's a lot of nakedness.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say we have a very full studio here. We've got a few minutes left. Okay, Latika, just first question over to you. You there's many things you want to know about this.
I'm intrigued by why so much nakedness.
I think the reason is, well, first of all, I mean, midsummer is it's the highlight of the summer. And let's remember that most of the Nordic countries, it's dark and miserable, like, several months of the year, winter all the way sort of up until April, May. So we just celebrate the warm season, the sunny season. Plus we go to the sauna, we swim, and sauna, of course, every Finn does the sauna naked. So I guess you're just naked all the time. It sort of fits the bill. Why put clothes on at all?
Yeah. Okay. So and of course, much of this comes back to the culture of the sauna as well. So, yes. So people generally are stripped off. Okay. So Petri, Nina dos Santos is here. She has a question for you.
It sounds very sort of innocent and sweet, doesn't it? I'm feeling personally like I've sort of been wafted in birch tree smoke, and I'm feeling very cleansed by the sound of, this idyllic fox, crossing a lake, and everybody sort of stripping down and, having a nice time in the midsummer. I think it's great, actually, from the confines of W1 in the most central part of London. This is kind of doing it for me.
So, Petri, I'm curious though. So, is the country officially off now? So, we're hours away from Monday morning. Has the country sort of officially demobilized now?
Country is completely demobilized. I mean, usually when I come on these shows, I talk about Nordic news. There is no news. I checked. There is zero news. I mean, I guess it's a slow news day elsewhere as well. You were talking about Emmental holes, but it's a super slow news day.
Careful, the Swiss ambassador just walked into the studio. So don't talk about Emmental holes just yet, please, Petri. Okay, Emma, last question over for you.
Thank you, Tyler. Petri, good morning. A slightly less bucolic question. As a hard-nosed journalist, I want to know, do we have any metrics that can quantify the success rate of a single person bending over and looking down into a well without any clothes on? Does that improve their chances?
Yes, we have the metrics. Every single year, the month where most kids are born in Finland is either March or April. So you do the math. Minus 9 months.
Thank you.
Okay, listen, Petri, I don't know if you caught the top of the program. We were talking about Miss Zabilska, or someone who's running her dating agency over in Warsaw, just across the way from you. It sounds like she should maybe be moving part of her business, Emma, up to Finland. No.
Good. Well, it sounds like she might get a bit luckier, but you do sort of set ourselves up for success. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know the ins and outs of Polish dating and how much clothes you need to wear when you're dancing around a maypole, but it sounds, Petri, that actually everybody should head to Finland if they just need to put flowers underneath their pillow. Put it that way.
Yeah, that's what they should be doing. It's I mean, all the joking aside, it's a wonderful time of year. It's a wonderful celebration. It's a celebration of summer and sun and people coming together, eating good food, drinking lots of schnapps and singing. And it's just such a communal and nice and sunny feel good midsummer celebration. So yes, everybody should head over here.
You've brought some of those Baltic rays to the studio for sure. Stay away from those swans and those seagulls, Petri, as well, if you can. That was our Petri Burtsoff joining us. I know some unidentified location out in some archipelago somewhere in and around Finland. It's just gone 9:42 here. We're in London. I was going to say we're in Zurich. We're not in Zurich, but it's now gone 10:43 in Zurich. I'm very happy to say that we're joined by our neighbour from just around the corner, Switzerland's ambassador to the UK. Markus Leitner is here with us this morning. Very, very nice to see you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it was wonderful having you, of course, yesterday popping in. We had the Swiss summer market. I mean, you want to talk about, Emma, this was soft power, at its best, wasn't it? This was, every aspect of Switzerland occupying in a very nice way, of course. This was sort of not a land grab occupation. We invited Switzerland in, and they put on an extraordinary show.
It was the loveliest land grab on earth because you had everything that Switzerland is really good at. I mean, you were talking, there was a lovely reception on Friday evening when we were all talking about how Switzerland has suddenly realised almost as if, you have absolutely everything to offer. You have a hot summer, you have a beautiful, cold, crisp, gorgeous winter, you have outdoors, you have mountains, you have fabulous aircraft and a wonderful airline, you have excellent cheese. Every age group, every walk of life will find something that just absolutely touches them deeply. It's a good place.
So I want to start, Ambassador, just first welcome, but maybe when we're in this period of extraordinary jockeying right now when it comes to tourism. Of course, we have our Mediterranean neighbours, and we've got protests going on as well. We have obviously the odd village and odd region in Switzerland which is not thrilled with mass tourism at the moment. But maybe you're not wearing your tourism hat. I know you've got maybe sort of harder diplomatic topics to deal with. But what does Switzerland have to offer the Monocle listener, at least for this summer?
Well, I think we are in London now, so usually we see a lot of British tourists in winter skiing. The UK brought the British brought skiing to Switzerland. We have to say, and we're still grateful. We're celebrating 100 years of the oldest ski club founded by the British this year. So, but what we want to show is that Switzerland is very much a summer destination as well. The cities, the festivals, there are a lot of culture that you can experience in Switzerland. Great food, great restaurants. I think we have the biggest density of Michelin star restaurants in Switzerland. So there's a lot for everybody in Switzerland. What I particularly like, obviously you can jump basically in any lake, any river in Switzerland, and you can swim. Doesn't have to be naked as you have as in Scandinavia maybe, but that's another topic.
But I would say as well, not to get on the topic of nudity, but I do have to say that we could bring Petri back in on this topic. So, but Emma, you will know this as well, which is the Swiss of course are very they like their regimes as well, and you do not go into a co-ed sauna in Switzerland even with a face towel. I mean this is a democracy at its best. Everyone has to be there. Everyone has to let it all hang out in Switzerland.
This is why I've never been into a sauna in Switzerland. Well, may I say, Ambassador, welcome. I actually live on the same square as your embassy, and she's not the crazy lady running around naked, just so you know, on the top floor. So I can see into your front room, and I can see people watching telly. But the nice thing is you have
doesn't sound odd at all.
It's really weird when I'm the crazy lady looking into your house. But you have the best outward display of Christmas, of window boxes. There is that always lovely thing that we measure the seasons by what you're doing on your front door, because you always, when you put your flowers out and you put your Christmas decorations out, it's one of those things that you think, okay, the Swiss set the time. And they've done it for our whole square.
And you raised a question, so I'm wondering, is there sort of a special message that sort of comes out, sort of almost like a cable to all diplomatic missions around the world from Bern, say, okay, it's time for geraniums, window boxes, whether this is, well, I don't know how geraniums would do in Dakar, but I was at your nice embassy in Dakar last year, or is it autonomous? I mean, is this federalism at its best that you can choose when you sort of throw out the geraniums?
As you know, we are a very decentralized country, and and we like the bottom-up approach. And so, yes, it's every embassy doing it. And I have to commend my staff, actually, to what you're saying in terms of what they do, and they take a lot of care.
Okay, well, let's move on from window boxes. Before a little bit earlier, I was chatting to Nina. Okay, so here we have Switzerland, not a member, of course, of the EU, but a country which has found its way, a country which is very much, of course, part of the European project, but it's not part of the EU project. It is part of Schengen, though. At the same time, I'm wondering how busy are your diplomats, especially in these times, these post-Brexit times, election, of course, around the corner. Coaching, talking to MPs in this country, does Switzerland play a role, Ambassador, in terms of actually helping nations like the UK try to navigate where they need to go and what that relationship is going to be as it moves forward with Brussels and, of course, the EU members?
Well, I think it is busy days for diplomats, and I'm the wrong person not to say that. But we just come out of the Birkenstock Ukraine conference. We are still member of the Security Council at the UN. And obviously we are in the midst of negotiations with the European Union. In the UK, I think post-Brexit, we could see that Switzerland has become an interesting reference point for the UK, as you mentioned, to be outside of the European Union, but negotiating, finding a way of a relation. And we feel, obviously, we are very much in a strong relationship with the European Union. It has its ups and downs, but we are negotiating an even stronger relation, and we're doing well. Switzerland created last year 100,000 jobs that mostly go to EU citizens, by the way. So we're doing well, and we found some sort of a way of an arrangement with the European Union that needs renewal now, needs expansion. That's what we're doing. And I think from that point of view, we are an interesting reference point for the UK. And that's what we are talking with the UK. For us, the UK is an interesting country as well now outside of the European Union. We can do contracts and agreements that we haven't been able to do. We just signed an agreement on financial services end of last year. We are negotiating a modernized free trade agreement with the UK. We hope to get more in terms of mobility with each other. So there is a lot of topics that we are talking currently, and that keeps us busy.
I mean, it's remarkable when you talk about, of course, the creation of 100,000 new jobs. And then at the same time, of course, when you're within Switzerland, just the discussion about a nation of 10 million people, and this is sort of like the big almost doomsday story, whether you look at Blick or you're looking at Le Temps or any number of newspapers. And of course, many would say, well, of course, the country will have to, and of course, it can accommodate 10 million people. But let's say the surge and the job creation is an interesting one, because we used to look at financial services, Ambassador, but now it's kind of amazing that you have so many other sectors on the rise that you just wouldn't have seen, even if you would have rewound and thought about Winterthur, you would have thought about St. Gallen, Zurich 10 years ago. Where are you seeing the spikes? What are the interesting areas and also, maybe this is also a moment of, for our listeners, doors are open. Who wants to go to Switzerland? What kind of talent are you looking for?
Well, as you say, I think we have been able to maintain a very diverse industry in Switzerland, not just the financial sector. There's a lot of life science, obviously, as you know. We try as well to be a big ecosystem in terms of innovation, startup companies that come out of our universities, and we have some of the best universities in Europe together, by the way, with the UK. So we try to be as broad as possible, not to be dependent on one sector. But life science, as I said, is a big one too. That's the reason why our exports to the UK continue to grow year by year, even during COVID times. So it is the UK is an important destination for our exports in a wide range of sectors.
Ambassador Nina, I'd like to ask, are you seeing a lot more people from the UK being tempted to take jobs in Switzerland? Anecdotally, I do know friends who are in the life sciences side, financial services side, who are increasingly moving to Switzerland. And may I also commend the Swiss generally on your fantastic professionalism. I think for everybody who, has spent any time living and working in Switzerland, how does Switzerland, keep that culture of just utter pleasant professionalism where things really work? Because it's so refreshing if you live in a UK post-Brexit, where obviously, services are a little bit crumbly at the moment.
Well, I have to say we manage well to attract talents, and these talents are coming from the UK, but also from EU countries, particularly obviously our neighbouring countries. And I think we're very happy with being able to attract these talents, because obviously that's what we're all after at the end of the day. But it's not just that they move necessarily to Switzerland. We see a lot of professional services trade happening between Switzerland and the UK. So we have a lot of people coming to Switzerland, providing their services, moving back, and the other way around. And that's something that we want to encourage, where we want to have better mobility between our two countries. And yes, to maintain this level of services, I think it's important as well to keep the investment level high and the productivity level. And I think what helps us there is the currency. It's a Swiss franc is a strong currency. So if you want to be successful in terms of your exports, you need to adapt, you need to invest, and you need to be productive and improve your productivity at least by 1% a year. Otherwise, you are out of the market.
Yeah, I mean, or you might even be out of the country as well. Because Emma, it was interesting. My mom landed in Zurich the other day, and we went for a walk. We went down to the lake for a swim in the morning, and it was that school time, and it just it's still one of these amazing things when you see 5-year-olds walking to school on their own in Switzerland. People are just always sort of just baffled and amazed. And I would say it's both Switzerland and Japan, probably the only sort of major league nations where you still see this happen. And I'm wondering if that is sort of a challenge, as well, because there's always these sort of battles going on, because also it's, you bring in sort of, new migrants who are making, $1 million a year, and they want, of course, drive their kids to school in a Range Rover, which just does not fly with the Swiss at all. It's like, you have to get your kid to walk to school. Maybe you can escort them. But that's interesting, right? When you're also talking to people at top sector as well, how you bring them along, Ambassador, and say, this is this, you might have done it this way living in Montecito, but we're not doing that in Erlenbach.
Well, yes, it obviously has a lot to do with the public school system, because in Switzerland you send your kids to public school. If you send them to private school, it seems that they don't cope or somewhat...
Or they're not so bright.
Whatever. So it's you send them to public school, and then obviously that's the next school. And so you don't need to drive them to whatever other area. What we see, though, is obviously with the people coming from abroad, that the Swiss system is where you have 2/3 of the Swiss are not going to university. So this dual system of education is more difficult to grasp for people from abroad. So they push their kids into a university rather than the Swiss system. So that's definitely a challenge which we haven't, I think, fully mastered. But it's something that we're looking at. As I said, we're very proud of a public school system that is very performant and gives good results.
Okay, we have a few minutes before the end of the program. I've got to bring Latika in because, of course, we were talking about rosé at the start of the program. I need to say that actually this building, behind these walls, it's just awash with not just Swiss rosé from Ticino, from Lugano, but all kinds of Swiss wine. You were talking about exports. I think we've got the bulk of the imports now in this building of Swiss wine. Most of it is consumed, of course, within Switzerland's borders. But you took us across the border to France and set up the rosé story for us just at the end, because we have to sort of test the ambassador's diplomatic skill set on this rosé topic.
This might be tricky for you because it's a bit of a thorny debate about how to serve rosé. What's the ideal temperature? Now, this article in the Times today says it's an absolute no-no to put ice cubes in it. Apparently, some people serve it in a kind of gin-style glass. Fill it with ice cubes.
A piscine. It's like a piscine, yeah. Right? Nina, it would be a piscine, no?
I'm shivering at the thought of it. It's not just the ice.
Yes. Now, the experts say that's a terrible no-no because ice is filled with things like calcium and upsets the delicate balance. And there's a bit of controversy about what temperature you should serve it at, whether it's around 12 degrees, 8 or 10. A consensus in this article is around 5 to 7. So that's quite cool. But we were arguing or talking earlier, Ambassador, about whether we even like rosé. It's my least favourite. Where are you on the rosé debate? Do you like rosé?
Well, first I have to say we are serving Swiss wine at the Swiss residence by law. So this
by law?
I like this.
But we do it with more and more pleasure, I have to say.
But is there a good Eau de Petri, for example?
Oh, absolutely. And you should come over and we'll do the test. But
do we have to appreciate it by law?
No, I think we got a good echo, but then these are invited guests anyway. So it's I like rosé in summer. I like it cool. I'm not sure about the exact temperature. I'm not sure about...
But don't they decree this in Britain? What are they doing in the protocol office of the Swiss Foreign Ministry? They must have a temperature,
Absolutely.
you would think, right?
I see the need for some protocol interventions here.
Listen, it's not midsummer in Switzerland, so they're going to be busy in Bern this morning, don't you think, Emma?
I think it would be absolutely amazingly busy. What I loved from your answer just then, Ambassador, was the fact that as a professional diplomat, you have to be very, very careful in what you say about rosé. So I thought that was expertly handled.
in summer, I noted the caveat there. In summer, he likes rosé.
Exactly.
But what about the ice?
Well, as well. Anyway, there's been plenty of well, I said rosé, some nice Merlot from down from Ticino as well. Also, which is, and they said they just had to leave it, which is unfortunate. But they said we're not allowed to resell it, which is fine, because it'll just be consumed.
Poor things.
Yeah. So anyway, Ambassador, thank you to all of your colleagues as well. It was a wonderful market. They said that they even want to repeat it as well. So,
well, thank you for having us. Thank you for hosting this. It was a fabulous event. I was there yesterday. Thanks a lot.
We might be back for a Weihnacht, so maybe a Swiss Noel, we will see. Nina DeSantos, great seeing you. And we'll catch you very soon. Latika, finally great to meet you in studio. I mean, amazing.
What an honour it was, Tyler.
Emma Nelson, as ever. Chris Cermak had to vacate his seat because we had to make room for this the ambassador in this very packed program today. Also, huge thanks to our Petri Burtsoff as well. Also, Ambassador Markus Leitner, a Swiss ambassador to the United Kingdom. Our producers today, Mariella Bevan, Chris Cermak, also Emma Nelson as well, and our studio manager, Lily Austin. I'm Tyler Brûlé. We're back next week. Goodbye.